My friends, imagine waking up each day with a deep sense of peace, knowing that the challenges you face are already in God's hands. Picture the feeling of gratitude swelling within you, not because every prayer has been answered yet, but because you trust fully in the one who hears them. Life often feels like a journey full of uncertainty. But what if I told you there's a way to navigate this journey with unwavering confidence? The secret lies in the power of faith, in thanking God before the blessings have even materialized. Faith, at its core, is not just belief in what can be seen or proven. It's an assurance, a deep-seated trust in what is yet to come. It's about stepping into each day with the certainty that God's plan is unfolding perfectly. Even when we can't see it, this profound truth has the power to transform your life. And today, I want to take you on a journey that begins with thanking God in advance. Thanking God in advance isn't just a practice of polite gratitude, it's a bold declaration of faith. It's standing firm in the belief that the breakthrough, the healing, the answer to your prayer, is already set in motion. Even if you can't see it yet, it's a choice to celebrate the victory before the battle is even over. As we dive deeper into this concept, we'll explore the richness of living a life filled with this kind of faith. Together, we'll discover how thanking God in advance can change the way you see your circumstances, bringing peace and joy even in the midst of uncertainty. Whether you're facing challenges in your health, relationships, or personal growth, this practice will shift your perspective and strengthen your trust in God's promises. Today is the day to unlock a new level of spiritual strength. Let's embark on this journey, opening our hearts to experience the life-changing power of faith and gratitude. As we continue, let us reflect on what it truly means to live in faith. Faith is often described as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. This description, taken from Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1, reveals a powerful truth. Faith is not passive, it is an active engagement with the promises of God. To live by faith means to walk each day as though the blessings we are waiting for have already been delivered. To celebrate victories we have not yet seen, and to trust deeply in the plan that God has for our lives. When we thank God in advance, we are actively participating in the manifestation of those blessings. We are not simply waiting for something to happen. We are aligning ourselves with the divine timing and the will of God. Think of it as planting seeds in fertile soil. We may not see the growth immediately, but by nurturing those seeds with gratitude and faith, we trust that they will bloom in time. The Bible tells us in Mark chapter 11 verse 24, "Therefore I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you will have them." This verse is a powerful reminder that faith is more than hope. It is the certainty that what we have asked for is already on its way. This kind of faith is transformative. It shapes the way we approach each situation in life, from the smallest daily tasks to the greatest challenges. Consider the story of Paul and Silas, who found themselves imprisoned, beaten, and chained. They could have focused on their suffering and their seemingly hopeless circumstances. But instead, they chose to sing hymns of praise to God. They thanked Him not for the prison they were in, but for the deliverance they knew was coming. Their faith, combined with their gratitude, moved the hand of God. There was an earthquake, their chains fell off, and the prison doors swung open. Their example teaches us that when we focus on the faithfulness of God rather than the difficulties we face, we create space for miracles to unfold. We too have this choice in our lives. Whether we are facing financial difficulties, health problems, or relational struggles, we can choose to focus on the chains that bind us or lift our voices in praise. thanking God in advance for the freedom that is to come. When we cultivate this unwavering faith, it is not an act of denial, it is an act of profound trust. We are not ignoring the reality of our problems. We are choosing to trust in a higher reality, the reality of God's love, His provision, and His perfect plan. This trust is the cornerstone of faith. It is the bedrock upon which our spiritual lives are built. When we thank God in advance, we are building our faith on this solid foundation. We are declaring, through our gratitude, that we believe in the goodness of God even when our circumstances seem to say otherwise. This is the kind of faith that can move mountains. It is the kind of faith that opens doors, breaks chains, and sets captives free. And as we practice this faith, as we thank God in advance, we are transformed from the inside out. Thanking God in advance not only strengthens our faith, but it also changes our perspective. When we choose gratitude in the face of uncertainty, we begin to see our circumstances through a new lens. We are no longer overwhelmed by what is lacking. Instead, we are filled with expectation for what is to come. This shift in perspective brings peace in the midst of turmoil and joy in the midst of hardship. The Bible tells us in Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7 to be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Thanksgiving is not an afterthought. It is an integral part of our relationship with God. It is through thanksgiving that we invite His peace into our lives. As we continue on this journey of faith, let us remember that God's timing is perfect. Sometimes, the hardest part of faith is not believing that God will answer our prayers, but trusting in when He will do so. We live in a world that values instant gratification, where we expect things to happen immediately. But God does not operate on our timeline. His blessings often come at unexpected moments, in ways we could never have imagined. To thank God in advance is to embrace His divine timing. It is to trust that He knows the best moment for every breakthrough, every blessing, and every answered prayer. The Bible reminds us in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 that to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. There is a season for planting and a season for harvest. Just as the farmer does not dig up his seeds to check their progress, we too must trust in the process. We must believe that in due time, the harvest will come. This is the essence of embracing divine timing. It is recognizing that God's plan is unfolding, even when we cannot see it, and thanking Him for the blessings that are on their way. Consider the story of Joseph, who had dreams of leadership and greatness, but whose path to fulfillment was long and filled with trials. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and imprisoned. Yet, throughout it all, Joseph maintained his faith in God's promises. He trusted in God's timing, even when everything seemed to be going wrong. And in the end, God's perfect timing placed Joseph in a position of leadership, where he was able to save countless lives. Joseph's story teaches us that even when our circumstances seem bleak, God is working behind the scenes, preparing us for the blessings that are to come. When we thank God in advance, we are choosing to trust in this divine timing. We are declaring that even in our darkest moments, God is at work. This trust brings peace to our hearts and frees us from the anxiety of trying to control every aspect of our lives. It allows us to rest in the knowledge that God's plan is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own expectations. Patience is an essential part of this process. To thank God in advance is to wait on Him with a heart full of gratitude and expectation. It is not a passive waiting, but an active trust in His timing. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 8 verse 25, "But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance." This eager waiting is at the heart of faith. It is the willingness to trust that God's plan is unfolding, even when we cannot see the results. It is the determination to continue thanking Him. Even in the waiting, gratitude is more than just a reaction to receiving blessings. It is a transformative force that reshapes our outlook on life. When we live with a heart of gratitude, we are choosing to focus on the good that is already present in our lives, while also anticipating the greater good that is yet to come. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 18, the Bible instructs us to give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Notice that it says, in all circumstances, not just for the good ones. This means that even in the midst of difficulties, we can find reasons to be thankful. When we thank God in advance, we are practicing this principle in its purest form. We are choosing gratitude before the blessing manifests, trusting that God's promises are true and that His plan is already in motion. This kind of gratitude opens our eyes to the many blessings that surround us daily. It helps us see the sunrise as a reminder of God's faithfulness, or a kind word from a friend as a reflection of His love. Even the challenges we face become opportunities to deepen our trust in Him. Gratitude also has a profound impact on our mental and emotional well-being. Studies have shown that practicing gratitude can reduce stress, improve sleep, and increase overall happiness. But beyond these scientific benefits, gratitude aligns our hearts with God's truth. It reminds us that no matter what we are facing, God is with us, and His plans for us are good. Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7 tells us, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Thanksgiving is not only a response to blessings, it is also a key component of effective prayer. When we thank God in advance, we are inviting His peace into our lives. We are choosing to focus on His goodness rather than on our worries. This peace is a gift that surpasses all human understanding. It guards our hearts and minds, protecting us from the stress and anxiety that often accompany waiting. When we thank God in advance, we are choosing to rest in the knowledge that He is in control. We may not know how or when our prayers will be answered, but we can trust that they will be answered in the way that is best for us. In addition to transforming our personal outlook, gratitude also has a ripple effect on those around us. When we live with a heart of thankfulness, we become more patient, kind, and understanding. We are less likely to complain and more likely to encourage others. Our gratitude becomes contagious, inspiring those around us to see the good in their own lives and to trust in God's faithfulness. Consider how Paul and Silas, in their moment of imprisonment, chose to sing hymns of praise. Their gratitude, despite their dire circumstances, not only led to their deliverance but also inspired the other prisoners who were listening. Gratitude, when practiced in faith, has the power to change not only our own lives but also the lives of those around us. It is a beacon of hope in a world often filled with negativity. Thanking God in advance also strengthens our prayer life. When we focus on what God has already done and what He is going to do, our prayers become more powerful and effective. Instead of praying from a place of desperation, we pray from a place of victory. We trust that God has already made a way, and we are simply waiting for His perfect timing to reveal it. The psalmist captured this beautifully in Psalm chapter 100 verses 4 to 5. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful to him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. When we approach God with a heart of thanksgiving, we are positioning ourselves to receive his blessings. We are acknowledging his goodness and faithfulness before we even present our requests. This attitude of gratitude also helps us maintain perspective in difficult times. When we thank God in advance, we remind ourselves that he sees the bigger picture. We may only see a small piece of the puzzle, but God sees the whole thing. He knows how each challenge we face fits into his greater plan for our lives. This doesn't mean that we deny the reality of our struggles, but it does mean that we choose to view them through the lens of faith. Gratitude fuels our faith and our hope. When we thank God for what he will do, we are strengthening our belief in his promises. We are training our hearts to expect good things from a good Father. This expectant gratitude keeps us moving forward, even when progress seems slow. It gives us the strength to persevere, knowing that God is working all things for our good. In Romans chapter 8 verse 28, we are reminded that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. This truth serves as a foundation for our gratitude. No matter what we are facing, we can trust that God is using it for our benefit. This kind of trust transforms our waiting periods from times of frustration to times of anticipation. Instead of worrying about when or how God will answer our prayers, we can rest in the knowledge that his timing is perfect. As we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we become more aware of God's presence in our daily lives. We start to see his hand at work in both the big moments and the small ones. Our lives become a continuous conversation with him, filled with praise and thanksgiving. This constant communion with God not only deepens our relationship with him but also transforms our character. We become more like Christ, who always gave thanks to the Father. Jesus, even in the face of suffering, shows gratitude at the Last Supper, knowing the pain and sacrifice that awaited him. He took bread, gave thanks, and broke it. In this act, Jesus demonstrated that gratitude is not contingent on our circumstances. It is a reflection of our trust in God's plan and our recognition of his goodness. No matter what we face, when we live with this kind of gratitude, we become a testimony to others. People are drawn to those who radiate joy and thankfulness. In a world that often focuses on what is lacking, a heart of gratitude stands out as a beacon of hope and faith. By thanking God in advance, we become living examples of his goodness and faithfulness. My friends, I encourage you to begin practicing advanced gratitude today. Start by thanking God for the answers to prayers you haven't seen yet. Express gratitude for breakthroughs that are still in progress. Watch as this attitude of thankfulness transforms your perspective and strengthens your faith. Remember, gratitude is not just a feeling, it is a choice we make every day. And when we choose to thank God in advance, we are inviting his power into our lives. We are opening ourselves up to experience his peace, his joy, and his blessings in new and profound ways. As we continue this journey of faith and gratitude, it's important to delve deeper into the power that lies within these principles. Gratitude is not merely an expression of thanks. It is a transformative force that can radically shift our entire outlook on life. When we embrace gratitude, especially in advance of receiving God's blessings, we are stepping into a space of unwavering faith. This is where real transformation happens, not just in our circumstances, but within our hearts and minds. Thanking God in advance is an act of bold faith. It's easy to give thanks once the blessings have arrived, but it takes profound trust to thank Him before we see the results. This is where faith truly takes root. Faith is described in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 as the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It's about believing in the unseen, in the promises of God, even when they haven't yet materialized in our lives. When we choose to thank God before we see the breakthrough, we are aligning our hearts with His promises. We are declaring that we trust Him completely. No matter what, this kind of faith is not always easy, especially when we are faced with trials and hardships. It can be difficult to trust in God's plan when we can't see the way forward. Yet, it is in these moments that our faith is most powerful. Consider the story of Paul and Silas, who were imprisoned and beaten, their bodies in chains. Despite their dire circumstances, they chose to praise God and sing hymns of gratitude. They thanked Him in advance for their deliverance, even though they were still in chains. And because of their faith, an earthquake shook the prison. Their chains fell off, and they were set free. Their story is a powerful reminder of the impact that faith and gratitude can have in our lives. When we thank God in advance, even in the midst of our struggles, we are opening the door for His power to move in our lives. We are creating space for miracles. We are showing God that we trust Him to deliver us, even when we can't yet see the path to freedom. This doesn't mean that we should ignore our problems or pretend that everything is perfect. Rather, it means that we choose to trust in God's goodness and faithfulness. Even when things seem uncertain, we choose to focus on His promises rather than on our challenges. And in doing so, we find peace and joy in the journey, not just in the destination. Gratitude also has the power to shift our perspective. When we focus on what we're thankful for, we begin to see the blessings that are already present in our lives. It's easy to get caught up in what we don't have, but when we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we start to notice the small miracles around us, the beauty of a sunrise, the kindness of a stranger, the comfort of a loved one. These are all reminders of God's presence in our lives. When we thank God in advance, we are not only expressing our faith in His future blessings, but we are also becoming more aware of the blessings that already surround us. Living with a heart of gratitude also brings us closer to God. It deepens our relationship with Him because it shifts our focus away from our own desires and towards His will. When we thank Him in advance, we are acknowledging that His plan is better than anything we could imagine. We are surrendering our timeline, our expectations, and our desires to Him, trusting that He knows what is best for us. This trust is key to embracing God's timing. Often, one of the greatest challenges we face in our faith journey is learning to wait on God. We live in a world that values instant gratification, where everything is available at the click of a button. But God's blessings don't always arrive on our schedule. Sometimes, He asks us to wait, to be patient, to trust in His timing. And it is in these seasons of waiting that thanking God in advance becomes even more important. When we thank God in advance, we are not only expressing our faith in what He will do, but we are also embracing His timing. We are acknowledging that He knows the perfect moment for every breakthrough and blessing. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 1 tells us, "To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven." This verse reminds us that there is a divine order to everything in our lives. There is a season for planting and a season for harvest, a season for waiting and a season for receiving. Just as a farmer plants seeds and waits for them to grow, we too must trust in God's process. We may not see the growth right away, but that doesn't mean that God isn't at work. He is preparing us, nurturing us, and setting the stage for the blessings to come. When we thank Him in advance, we are trusting in this process. We are allowing Him to work behind the scenes, knowing that in due time, the harvest will come. Consider the story of Joseph, who dreamed of greatness but spent many years in slavery and prison before his dreams were fulfilled. Throughout his trials, Joseph remained faithful. He trusted in God's timing, even when everything seemed to be going wrong. And in the end, God's perfect timing placed Joseph in a position of great power, where he was able to save many lives. Joseph's story is a powerful reminder that even when our circumstances seem bleak, God is working behind the scenes, preparing us for the blessings that are to come. When we thank God in advance, we are choosing to trust in this divine timing. We are declaring that even in our darkest moments, God is at work. This trust brings peace to our hearts and frees us from the anxiety of trying to control every aspect of our lives. It allows us to rest in the knowledge that God's plan is perfect, even when it doesn't align with our own expectations. Patience is an essential part of this process. To thank God in advance is to wait on Him with a heart full of gratitude and expectation. It is not a passive waiting, but an active trust in His timing. The Bible tells us in Romans chapter 8 verse 25, "But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance." This eager waiting is at the heart of faith. It is the willingness to trust that God's plan is unfolding, even when we cannot see the results. It is the determination to continue thanking Him, even in the waiting. This kind of patience is not easy, but it is rewarding. When we learn to wait on God with gratitude, we find peace and strength that can only come from Him. We learn to rely on His grace rather than our own efforts. And in this waiting, our faith is strengthened. As we wait, we also grow in discernment. When we thank God in advance, we become more attuned to His voice. We learn to recognize His leading, whether He is saying, "Not yet," or "Move forward." This discernment is crucial in our walk of faith. It helps us avoid rushing ahead of God's plan or lagging behind. Instead, we learn to move in sync with His perfect timing. In waiting, we also develop a deeper understanding of God's character. We come to know Him not only as the giver of blessings, but as the one who sustains us through every season of life. We learn that His presence is enough, even when the blessings we're waiting for haven't yet arrived. As we continue reflecting on the power of gratitude, we begin to see how waiting on God's timing, with a heart full of thanksgiving, transforms our entire approach to life. Patience, grounded in gratitude, is more than just a passive act of waiting. It becomes an active choice to trust in God's divine plan, allowing our hearts to rest in the assurance that His timing is perfect, even when it seems delayed. This understanding leads to peace, a deep inner peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds even in the most difficult circumstances. When we live with this peace, we are no longer bound by the need to control every outcome. We stop trying to force things to happen according to our own plans and instead embrace the flow of God's work in our lives. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop working toward our goals, but rather that we align our actions with God's leading. We trust that as we continue to walk in faith and obedience, He will guide our steps and bring about His promises in due time. This posture of trust also allows us to enjoy the journey, rather than constantly striving for the destination. When we focus too much on the future, on what we hope will happen, we can miss the beauty and blessings of the present moment. But when we thank God in advance for what He is going to do, we are able to live in the now. fully embracing the experiences and lessons He has for us today. We come to understand that every season has a purpose and that even in the waiting, God is at work in our hearts, shaping us to become more like Him. Gratitude, then, is not just about receiving blessings, it is about transformation. It is about becoming more aware of God's presence in every aspect of our lives, recognizing that He is with us through every high and every low. When we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we begin to see the world through new eyes. We start to notice the small miracles, the moments of grace that often go unnoticed. A simple conversation with a friend, a quiet moment of reflection, or the beauty of creation all become reminders of God's goodness and faithfulness. Living with this awareness changes us. We become more patient, more compassionate, more grounded in the love of God. We are no longer easily shaken by the storms of life because we know that our foundation is secure. We have seen God's faithfulness in the past, and we trust that He will continue to be faithful in the future. This trust allows us to live with confidence, not in ourselves, but in the One who holds our lives in His hands. This confidence in God's faithfulness also deepens our prayer life. When we thank God in advance, we are shifting our focus from what we lack to what we already have in Him. We are acknowledging that He has already made provision for our needs, even if we have not yet seen it. This shift in focus brings a sense of peace and joy to our prayers. As we move from a place of asking to a place of receiving, we are no longer praying out of desperation, but out of a deep trust in God's provision. This change in perspective also strengthens our prayers. When we pray with a heart of gratitude, we are declaring that we believe in the promises of God. We are aligning our will with His will, trusting that His plans for us are good. This kind of prayer is powerful because it is rooted in faith, and faith moves mountains. Jesus tells us in Mark chapter 11 verse 23 that whoever says to this mountain, "Be removed and be cast into the sea," and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. This kind of bold faith, combined with gratitude, opens the door for God's power to move in our lives. Gratitude also protects us from the pitfalls of comparison and envy. In a world that often encourages us to measure our success by the achievements of others, it can be easy to fall into the trap of comparison. We may look at someone else's life and wonder why they seem to have it all together while we are still waiting for our breakthrough. But when we live with a heart of gratitude, we are able to celebrate the blessings in our own lives, as well as in the lives of others. We come to understand that God's timing is unique for each person and that His plan for us is different from His plan for anyone else. This realization frees us from the burden of comparison. Instead of focusing on what we don't have, we begin to see all that we do have. We start to appreciate the journey that God has us on, recognizing that every step is part of His perfect plan for our growth and development. And as we cultivate this attitude of gratitude, we become more content, more at peace with where we are, knowing that God is at work in our lives. Even in the waiting, this contentment does not mean that we stop dreaming or striving for more, but rather that we trust in God's timing and provision. We continue to work toward our goals, but we do so with a heart of peace, knowing that God will bring about the right opportunities at the right time. We no longer feel the need to rush ahead or force things to happen, because we trust that God's plan is far better than anything we could imagine for ourselves. Gratitude, then, becomes the foundation for a life of faith. It is the key to unlocking the peace and joy that comes from trusting in God's plan. When we thank God in advance, we are stepping into a place of deep trust, knowing that He is faithful to fulfill His promises. We are choosing to live with an expectant heart, fully believing that the best is yet to come. But gratitude does more than just change our hearts. It also changes the way we interact with the world around us. When we live with a heart of thankfulness, we become more generous, more compassionate, and more willing to extend grace to others. We recognize that everything we have is a gift from God, and this recognition inspires us to give back. We are no longer focused solely on our own needs, but on how we can be a blessing to those around us. This kind of generosity flows naturally from a heart that is grounded in gratitude. When we realize how much we have been given, we are compelled to share those blessings with others. And as we give, we find that we are blessed in return. Luke chapter 6 verse 38 reminds us, "Give, and it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." This promise reminds us that when we live with a spirit of generosity, we are not only blessing others but also positioning ourselves to receive even more of God's goodness. Gratitude also impacts our relationships. When we approach others with a heart of thankfulness, we become more patient, more understanding, and more willing to extend grace. We stop expecting others to meet all of our needs, and instead, we appreciate the unique gifts and qualities they bring into our lives. This shift in perspective allows us to build stronger, more meaningful connections with the people around us. It also helps us to let go of resentment and bitterness. When we live with a heart of gratitude, we are less likely to hold on to past hurts and more likely to extend forgiveness. We recognize that holding on to anger and resentment only harms us, while forgiveness sets us free. Colossians chapter 3 verse 13 reminds us to bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Gratitude helps us to see the bigger picture, to recognize that we are all recipients of God's grace, and that as we have been forgiven, we are called to forgive others. Living with gratitude also brings a sense of joy and fulfillment that cannot be found in worldly success or material possessions. When we are truly grateful for what we have, we stop chasing after things that don't really matter. We come to understand that true joy is found in our relationship with God and in the simple blessings of everyday life. We no longer need to strive for more, because we recognize that we already have all we need in Christ. This kind of contentment is rare in today's world, where we are constantly bombarded with messages telling us that we need more to be happy. But when we live with a heart of gratitude, we are able to tune out these messages and focus on what truly matters. We come to realize that the greatest blessings in life are not material, but spiritual. And as we cultivate this attitude of thankfulness, we experience a deep and lasting joy that transcends our circumstances. As we move forward in our reflection on the power of gratitude and faith, we encounter one of the most profound aspects of our relationship with God, trusting Him completely. Even when we don't see immediate answers to our prayers, this trust is anchored in the understanding that God's timing is perfect. Even when it doesn't align with our expectations, when we thank God in advance, we are not only expressing our faith in what He will do, but we are also surrendering to His perfect timing. We are acknowledging that He knows the best moment for every blessing, every breakthrough, and every answer to our prayers. This requires a deep level of trust, because as human beings, we often want things to happen on our timeline. We may find ourselves asking God for immediate solutions, hoping for quick results, but God, in His infinite wisdom, often asks us to wait. He asks us to trust that He is working behind the scenes. even when we cannot see it. This trust in God's timing is one of the greatest tests of our faith. But it is also one of the most rewarding aspects of our spiritual journey. When we learn to thank God in advance, we are embracing His timing. We are choosing to believe that His plan for us is better than anything we could plan for ourselves. We are saying, God, I trust you, even if the answer doesn't come today. I trust you even if I don't understand why things are happening the way they are. I trust you because I know that your timing is perfect. This kind of trust brings peace to our hearts. It frees us from the anxiety of trying to control every aspect of our lives and allows us to rest in the knowledge that God is in control. The Bible gives us many examples of people who trusted in God's timing, even when it seemed like all hope was lost. One such example is the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised Abraham that he would be the father of many nations. Yet Abraham and Sarah were childless for many years. They had to wait decades before God's promise was fulfilled through the birth of their son, Isaac. During this long wait, Abraham and Sarah had moments of doubt and impatience. But ultimately, they trusted in God's timing. And in the end, God's promise was fulfilled in a way that far exceeded their expectations. This story teaches us that waiting on God's timing is not easy. But it is always worth it. When we trust in His timing, we are allowing Him to work out His perfect plan for our lives. We may not understand why we have to wait, but we can trust that God is using the waiting period to prepare us for something greater. As we wait, God is shaping us, molding us, and preparing our hearts to receive the blessings He has in store for us. Thanking God in advance during the waiting period is an act of faith that deepens our relationship with Him. It shifts our focus from what we want to what God is doing. It helps us to see that even in the waiting, God is at work. He is refining our faith, teaching us patience, and strengthening our trust in Him. When we thank God in advance, we are acknowledging that His timing is not only perfect, but also purposeful. Every delay, every closed door, and every unanswered prayer is part of His divine plan for our lives. Embracing this truth requires us to shift our perspective. Instead of seeing delays as obstacles, we begin to see them as opportunities for growth. Instead of feeling frustrated when things don't happen as quickly as we would like, we start to recognize that God's timing is an essential part of His plan. This perspective brings a sense of peace and contentment, knowing that God is working everything out for our good. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 reminds us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose." This verse is a powerful reminder that no matter what we are going through, God is working behind the scenes. He is orchestrating everything in our lives according to His perfect plan. When we thank God in advance, we are aligning ourselves with this truth. We are choosing to believe that God's plan is unfolding, even when we can't see it. This faith-filled gratitude also helps us to be patient in the waiting. When we trust in God's timing, we are able to wait with a sense of peace and expectation. Rather than frustration and impatience, we know that God's blessings will come at the right time, and we are content to wait for His perfect timing. This patience is not passive, but active. It is a posture of the heart that says, "God, I trust you. I believe that your timing is best, and I am willing to wait for your perfect plan to unfold." This kind of patience transforms the way we approach life. Instead of rushing through each day, constantly seeking the next thing, we begin to live in the present moment. We start to appreciate the beauty of each day, recognizing that even in the waiting, God is blessing us. We come to see that every moment is a gift from God, and that even in the seemingly mundane aspects of life, He is at work. This brings us to another key aspect of thanking God in advance: the power of gratitude in everyday life. Gratitude is not just something we express when we receive blessings, it is a way of life. When we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we begin to see God's hand in everything. We start to recognize that every breath, every sunrise, and every act of kindness is a gift from God. We begin to live with a sense of awe and wonder, seeing the beauty of God's creation all around us. This daily practice of gratitude transforms our lives. It helps us to focus on what we have, rather than what we lack. It shifts our perspective from scarcity to abundance, from anxiety to peace, and from frustration to joy. When we live with a heart of gratitude, we are constantly reminded of God's goodness. We see His blessings in the small things, and we are filled with joy and contentment. Gratitude also has the power to change the way we interact with others. When we live with a thankful heart, we become more patient, more kind, and more compassionate. We stop focusing on our own needs and start seeing the needs of those around us. We become more generous, more willing to serve, and more eager to extend grace to others. Gratitude softens our hearts and opens our eyes to the beauty of the people around us. It helps us to appreciate the relationships we have and to be more intentional in nurturing those connections. Furthermore, gratitude strengthens our faith. When we thank God in advance, we are declaring that we trust in His promises. We are choosing to believe that He is faithful, even when we don't see immediate results. This kind of faith moves mountains. It opens the door for God to work in our lives in ways we never imagined. As we continue to thank God in advance, we find that our faith grows stronger, our trust in Him deepens, and our lives are transformed by His grace. Living a life of gratitude also brings us closer to God. When we thank Him for the blessings we have and for the blessings that are yet to come, we are drawing near to His heart. We are recognizing that everything we have is a gift from Him, and we are acknowledging His sovereignty over our lives. This closeness to God brings a sense of peace and fulfillment that cannot be found anywhere else. As we draw near to God through gratitude, we also experience His presence in new and powerful ways. The Bible tells us in Psalm chapter 22 verse 3 that God inhabits the praises of His people. When we thank Him, we are inviting His presence into our lives. We are creating space for Him to move in our hearts and in our circumstances. This practice of thanking God in advance opens the door for miracles, for breakthroughs, and for the fulfillment of His promises in our lives. To live with a heart of gratitude is to live in the fullness of God's love. It is to walk each day knowing that we are deeply loved, that we are cared for, and that God's plan for our lives is good. This awareness brings peace, joy, and contentment, even in the midst of challenges. It helps us to navigate life's ups and downs with grace, knowing that no matter what happens, God is with us, and He is working all things together for our good. In conclusion, the power of gratitude in our spiritual journey cannot be overstated. When we thank God in advance, we are expressing our faith in His promises, trusting in His perfect timing, and acknowledging His presence in our daily lives. This kind of gratitude transforms us from the inside out. It deepens our relationship with God, strengthens our faith, and brings peace and joy into our hearts. As we cultivate a heart of gratitude, we are opening ourselves up to experience the fullness of God's love and to live the abundant life that He has promised us. So, let us choose today to live with a heart of gratitude. Let us thank God not only for the blessings we have received, but also for the blessings that are yet to come. Let us trust in His timing, knowing that He is working all things together for our good. And let us walk each day with a sense of awe and wonder, recognizing the beauty of His creation and the depth of His love for us.